Now, I think the solution here, right, is really around how do I get into a continuous security monitoring scenario for Jenkins, right? So I want to take the next handful of slides and start talking a little bit about sort of how we go about this, right? Sort of, or how I might suggest we go about this, right? And it's really something that, no surprise, the OpsMX team is going to adopt, and as we productize securing the end-to-end security of your CI/CD process. So I think there's a sort of workflow here that we subscribe to as part of our application security posture management tooling, which is go out and collect security data. Right. So for those of you that have seen some of my webinars in the past, I'm a big fan of collecting, normalizing, evaluating, alerting / enforcing, and then reporting. And so for me, doing this, as part of the Jenkins system, as we go through and continuously sort of do a rinse and repeat for each deployment that's done, it's about collecting that security data, which we're going to talk a little bit about here in just a minute in terms of what could be collected. Push that data for evaluation. What I mean by that is, how do I move that data up into sort of some system that can be used to evaluate it. I think specifically around, sort of compare it against a set of policies, right, to make sure that the policies are intact. And these would be, sort of passive or, sort of after the fact policies. We'll also talk about, how you can use things like OPA to enforce policies in real time or in line. Evaluate that data against that set of policies. So, for me anyway, it's about, hey, I've got these 10 data points, and the policies that I have set in place are expecting those data points to be X. If I find a data point that's Y, or it could be Y, depending on sort of what I'm evaluating, I want to make sure that I send an alert, right? So I send an alert that there's a violation there, and that hole can be closed pretty quickly, right? And then obviously generating a security report is another area where I think is part of your overall auditing of the entire end-to-end software delivery process, making sure that as you're going through that process, you're doing that specifically for Jenkins, from, again, based on the data that you're collecting, and then ultimately the policies that you want to set, and then ultimately say, hey, for these last 10 runs, we've had no problems with Jenkins because it's met all of our policies. And the reason you want to do this in a rinse and repeat fashion is, the Jenkins environment has a tendency to be fairly dynamic, right? So updates or upgrades are made. There's a new vulnerabilities that are being announced, hourly or daily or minute by minute, right? Or you've got situations where your DevOps team needs to reconfigure to accommodate a development process, right? So these are all things that the one thing you can count on is constant change. So making sure that you're evaluating this core set of policies as it pertains to securing that Jenkins system. This is sort of, I guess, what I'd call, sort of a basic workflow. And by the way, I don't expect you to fall out of your chair here. This is not terribly complicated stuff. It's fairly basic. But again, I think, when you think about having a million things to pay attention to, this often gets overlooked.